I've been kind of going back and forth on this one. I don't know if you are leaning some kind of way. Right now, I'm leaning Ravens just because they've been so dominant all year. And as much as like the Chiefs, what do you call them? The four paws?
Faux pas, the faux pas.
So as much as they randomly decided to step up in one game, like I don't trust MVS to make those two catches again in another game. So I'm probably going to go with the Ravens because of that. But it is a very even match.
Well, you're more familiar with these sorts of things than I am in terms of the metrics, but I do think it's been a bit underrated. Quietly, the 2023 Baltimore Ravens, at least in the regular season, kind of one of the greatest teams of all time by statistical profile. Like, I'm not wrong in saying that, am I?
No, not at all. Yeah, the way that they dominated good teams. And then when you dig into like the nerd numbers like DVOA, we are talking about a historically good football team. I mean, looking back at most of the games that they played this year, there were some weird fluke games. The Steelers game comes to mind. There was the Rams game where they just caught Matt Stafford on an absolute heater, which happened a lot this season. But other than that, they dominated good teams. I mean, we might get Ravens Lions. They dominated the Lions. We might get Ravens Niners. They dominated the Niners. Like they are so good and so balanced. Yeah, I do feel like they're a little bit underrated at this point. Like we should be thinking of them as a powerhouse coming into this.
So what have you thought about Lamar this year? Because he's going to win the MVP, but this was not, I don't want to say it's a season where he's winning the MVP by default, but he didn't feel as electric this year to me as like 2019 when he won it, when he just kind of jumped off the screen. But right now he's the quarterback of the best team in the league. And let's be honest, people just couldn't talk themselves into Brock Purdy, no matter how high the yards per attempt number was. But comparing this year's Lamar to what we had seen last year, like what are the differences that you see?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think one way to answer that is there's two things. So one thing is like when you watch him run this year, don't you feel like he's like 75% trying like this kind of LeBron conservation thing happening? And we took off for a couple times in the last game, and he did that thing he did in high school where he kind of goes to a full stop vertically and then kept going. And then at the end of the runs, he's like, all right, I had to do it. Fine. It's not like Josh Allen where he's so juiced or whatever. But I do feel like that there's a contrast between that and 2019 where every single run was like, oh my God, this guy is trying to literally make every person on the field retire at this moment and break off the most explosive run because he doesn't need to. And I think that's the biggest difference between this version of him and the 2019 version. The 2019 version, it felt like every single game he had to put on his back and win on his own, right? This version, it's an offense that can beat you a bunch of different ways. There's not an easy solve for them. You remember in 2019 in the playoff game, after he was MVP and whatnot, the Titans surprised them, essentially like stacking the box and forcing him to throw outside, and they didn't have a response. You contrast that with what you just saw at the Houston game, where in the first half, when Ryans was sending zero blitzes at him and they weren't solving it, I was like a little bit worried. Then they come out that first drive of the second half, the way this offense solved the blitz, he was getting the ball out so quickly, the spacing of the wide receivers, the way Todd Monken was using motion to create openings for those wide receivers, it doesn't look as crazy because it's simply like a quarterback playing at an extremely high level, throwing to good skill players, but it is far more dangerous because it's not all on the quarterback. So he has been amazing. He's like a very complete quarterback this year, but I don't think it's as overwhelming feeling because it doesn't have to be as overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think a testament to him that kind of gets lost in this is that we said, hey, Lamar, they got to go get him some weapons. And they got him weapons, but they ain't go out there and get like bazookas and grenades, right? Like they got some real sturdy pistols, perhaps a rifle, right? Like they got guys that'll do the job. They can kill you, don't get me wrong, but they're not going to napalm the world. Like Odell Beckham is at that point of his career where he's a very good player, a competent player probably, but we're not talking about, you wouldn't see that dude play and know that he was once really famous. Right? Like you would, like he doesn't seem to be that. Mark Andrews is that guy, but he hasn't been able to play for weeks. Zay Flowers, I feel like is promising, right? But we're not looking at like a great player in this moment. They are great because Lamar Jackson is great.
Yeah. And I think the offense is really smart and like puts them in good positions. I keep going back to the spacing. I can't tell you how many times the first 4 years or 2019 to 2022 with Greg Roman calling the offense, where I would just see two wide receivers like in the same space at the wrong time and not understand. Like, and some of that, by the way, isn't just play calling; it's how you coach them, execution, all of that. When you watch them now, the wide receivers are just there. It's not like there's no Jamar Chase on this team. There's not even a Brandon. Well, I think Zay Flowers is on his way to being pretty good, but the point is, the actual offense, the system, the structure of it is intelligent. They're attacking defenses. There's a logic to the play calling in terms of the sequencing of it, one thing opening up another. So you don't need, in the same way I was like, you don't need Lamar to be like overwhelming on his face. And he has been in games. I mean, the Rams game that I mentioned, on the other side, he was crazy. But you don't need the wide receivers to be insane, to make insane plays. They just got to be good, man. I mean, and they got to catch the football, and they're doing that. Previous to this, his receivers seemed to have like huge drops in big moments, and it was so infuriating because we knew the quarterback was going to get the bulk of the blame for it. This group just feels more trustworthy. I think that, and to that end, we talk about Lamar, we talk about the coaches, both sides amazing. This front office did a really good job this offseason. They probably overpaid Beckham, but if that's what it took to get him in the building, to get Lamar back, it was worth it.
Yeah, it was kind of wild. This time last year, they had beef.
Yeah.
And I was absolutely advocating for Lamar Jackson. Don't give him an inch. And he shouldn't have gave him an inch, by the way. I think we have the great testament of what we see right now. Get your guaranteed money. I really wish he had to. PrizePicks is the most fun you can have by winning up to 25 times your money this football season. And now you can play during basketball season too. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. PrizePicks is really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. So make sure you go to prizepicks.com/Bomani and use code Bomani for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/Bomani. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.